I'm gonna give a quick overview of the meeting here, and then Brian's gonna take over, and he's gonna give a presentation on the Valiton ditch project that he has been working on. I will then provide a quick summary of our response to comments from the solicitation of projects and comments that we did earlier this year. That was also presented. Then the big part of the meeting will be all the folks that did provide comments or projects have been given an opportunity to speak, and they will be able to present their projects to the council and the public. We will have a break in there. We'll continue with that. And then at the end of the meeting, I will do a quick summary of where we are in this revision process and give an update on the funding that is available to allocate funds to during this year's revision process. That I will let Brian try to figure out the thing. I will. You want to do it with your finger?
I can do it. Okay, so sorry again for technical difficulties. I'm Brian Barkoyak with the Natural Resource Damage Program. I just want to provide the council with a brief update of the Valiton Ditch project. Some of you have seen parts of this already. Some of this information is new. I think this project is a good example of where flow projects are going to be going. It's not just purchasing or leasing water, it's working with water users in cooperative ways to get more water into the river. It's also working with our project partners to make what we have stretch even farther. So this project started back in 2019 when the Natural Resource Damage Program brought the Clark Fork River Ranch. With that, we bought 24 CFS of paper water that was used to irrigate that property off of Valiton Ditch. Just to familiarize yourself, and I apologize for people online that can't see, we have Valiton Ditch, which actually starts over 2 miles upstream of here. We have the Clark Fork River Ranch pivots that are state owned. We have our neighbor, the Greco family, who operates their own pivots. And then we have Broken Circle Ranch. These are the 3 water users on Valiton Ditch. Working out the laser was. We're not works too good. So the to basically lease our pivots in exchange for use of their water late season. So what this actually means is we have a 2 to 3 year agreement in place now to see how things are working. If flows stay above 180 CFS in Deer Lodge, which is optimal flow for this part of the river, our neighbors are allowed to use our pivots and our water and irrigate year round. If flows drop below 180 CFS, after July 1, our neighbors have agreed to discontinue the use of our pivots and their water and put all that water in the river. This is again, putting water in the river in one of the most dewatered reaches of the Clark Fork. The highest priority area. And the final part we were working on is we were trying to, which one's the laser? We were trying to figure out a way to get Broken Circle, or the last remaining water user on that ditch, off the ditch. So then late season, we could discontinue use of the ditch completely. We were looking at some irrigation designs. These are new pivots. They have a pump station right by the river. This gets irrigated off the ditch. We were looking at designs to try to get them their water late season when the river's really low. And we weren't really having a lot of luck trying to figure out something that worked for everybody. So in one of our meetings with them, they said, well, why don't we just do a split season lease like you're doing with the Greco family? He said, well, that's a really good idea. And so we started looking at what that would look like. And this is all gonna go out in a funding recommendation. We'll take it out for public comment. We'll present it to you probably in September at the September meeting. With a lot more detail, but again, just to get your thoughts. So we started looking at what their value of their water was. Their value of their water was about 20,000 per year. The standard lifespan of irrigation infrastructure is 20 years. We look at doing a split season lease agreement for about $400,000, which is about the same amount it would take to upgrade their irrigation system to meet their ranching demands, and also, well, put more water in the river late season and frankly, reduce their workload. So I did mention this was a collaborative project. We have been working with the Clark Fork Coalition and TU, who have got funding from the Open Rivers Fund or the Resource Legacy Fund. And that fund is focused on opening up river miles for both fish passage and boat passage. So in conjunction with them, we knew that we were always going to use Valiton ditch in some way, shape, or form in the early season to irrigate our field, our neighbors' fields. So they went through, picture on the left for those who were here a few weeks ago, is what the diversion structure looked like. You can see there's a bunch of rocks in the river. You can see that probably doesn't look very friendly if you're floating downstream, and at certain times of year, it might be a fish passage barrier. They went in last fall, Andy, and upgraded that, and then the reconstructed diversion is on the right. You can see that looks a lot friendlier for both recreational passage and fish passage. And then just this spring, we were still going to use the broken circle pumps in some way, shape, or form with the agreement. The broken circle needs to irrigate their current areas. So again, picture on the left is what the diversion looks like. Again, not very friendly if you're going to float over it or try to be a fish and swim over it. Again, Andy, using some Open Rivers funds, went in and rebuilt that structure to more of a rough and riffle type structure. Like they're really sensitive and not sensitive at the same time.
Unpredictable.
So that's the project in a nutshell. We're gonna take it out for public comment, basically for what the split season lease on the broken circle would look like for the next 20 years. We'll present that to you back in again in September for your funding recommendation. And just to I know we have a lot to get through today, but just to touch on, we are doing a whole bunch of monitoring around this project, not only flows in the Clark Fork River and on Valiton Ditch, but also what this looks like in terms of productivity for the split season lease. Maybe you just gotta get closer. So one of the questions we've had with split season leases is how does it affect the productivity of the field? So we are going through and we're monitoring a bunch of stuff in terms of how much water we apply. We put our weather station up there. We put soil moisture probes in. We're looking at crop yield, diversity, forage valley, vegetative cover, basically all the factors that when people say, what's this going to do to my field if I only irrigate in the early season, that we will hopefully be able to answer those questions. And with that, if you get close to here,
You got it, you had it.
we have,
Here's a picture.
okay.
Think
And-
you throw your left leg up while you do it.
Yeah.
That's your right leg, it won't work.
Yeah. Happy to take any questions from the council right now, and then I think we can open it up for the public.
I have a question.
Yes.
What are the species on the range for the different range areas? Is it working better for certain crop species than it is for others?
We don't have a definitive answer to that yet, but it looks like And you're really going to tap my memory on what species are wetter and what species are drier, but it does seem with the split season leasing, a lot of the wetter species are being choked out. And so that's one thing that we can look at if we're gonna do these on other properties. Are there different seedings or are there different species mix that would work better in split season lease agreements?
Any other questions?
What would be the combined benefit to the watershed? I thought I heard 24 CFS.
It would be, so the total combined paper water right would be 40 CFS. So if we were just able to discontinue use of Valiton ditch in late season, that'd be 40 CFS of paper water that would stay in the river.
And in that section that you said gets unseasonably low, what does it get down to on a low in a normal year?
I have Andy here that will correct me if I say it wrong, but I think it's 8 CFS.
8.
Yeah, we measured it that low further downstream at that location, and that's probably not quite as low, maybe around 15 or 20, right at the diversion. About.
And I started this, so that person that was just speaking was Andy. Mike spoke before him, and Brian and Christy Beal spoke before that. I will now remember to have people say their names. Any other questions for the council? From the council, excuse me. Any questions from the public? All right.
My name is Doug Martin, the Natural Resource Damage Program. I'm going to be going over the response to comments that we put together for all of the projects that were submitted and the comments that were submitted during our solicitation period earlier this year. I would like to note and remind folks, this meeting is informational. We're providing the information about the projects and the comments. We're not making any funding decisions. Now I'll talk about that more later, but the funding decisions about how much funds each project will get will actually be an action item and be brought before the council in September, once the draft restoration plan has been through public comment. So as I noted, the projects, we did a solicitation earlier this winter. It closed on March 3rd. And basically, we were, as part of the process that we're required to go through, we were soliciting project ideas and comments about how we could revise the restoration plan to make it better. And all of this information is in your response to comments as well. So our evaluation wasn't looking at whether or not we could fund it. Our evaluation was looking at whether these projects that were submitted met the criteria for the natural resource damage criteria that's in the Department of Interior regs, as well as does it integrate with the restoration plans that we're currently implementing in the Clark Fork Basin. There are some specific requirements there. So these are the natural resource damage and state policy criteria on the right. You know, technical feasibility, cost benefit, cost effectiveness. You know, how do these projects integrate with remediation? Are there any adverse environmental effects from implementing these projects? So we looked at all the projects relative to each criteria. We also looked at the projects relative to the restoration plan. And the main criteria that we look at in the restoration plan is, are they associated with a priority area? Fish, Wildlife and Parks has done a very good job of identifying the aquatic and terrestrial priority areas within the basin. And we're trying to work within those areas. So we looked at the projects and whether or not they were in that. And I will, as I go through the projects, I will note how they meet those criteria. So the aquatic watershed projects, there were several comments submitted in the aquatic watersheds. And the circles on the right actually on the map identify where those are located. On the left side is Rock Creek, And then moving upstream, you have the Little Blackfoot River, Cottonwood Creek, Warm Springs Creek, and Browns Gulch. So in Cottonwood Creek, there were 4 projects that folks submitted, a variety of fish screening projects or habitat improvement projects. All of those projects that were submitted are eligible for funding, and they're already included in the restoration plan. Cottonwood Creek is a priority stream. We've had funding allocated to it. We're working on the priorities. One of the projects that was submitted, that I think you'll hear about, the WRC is here, is the course manning ditch, and that is actually the highest priority project on Cottonwood Creek. In Browns Gulch, 6 projects were submitted. All of those are eligible for funding. Browns Gulch is a priority 1 stream in the watershed. However, the funding that has been allocated to Browns Gulch at this point has been exhausted. So that will be part of the evaluation and the revision process is, do we want to add more funding to Browns Gulch? On the Little Blackfoot River, there was a comment submitted that to retain the funding that is in the Little Blackfoot River. The Little Blackfoot River has funding that hasn't been spent yet, and there was a comment that we should retain that. On Warm Springs Creek, there was 1 comment submitted requesting that we do the stream evaluation or the stream assessment. We did this at the beginning of the restoration plan development back in 2012. We assessed all of the watersheds to prioritize the projects that were on those watersheds. Warm Springs Creek was the exception because the fisheries biologist at the time knew the highest priority projects on Warm Springs Creek, and he didn't think that we needed to go through that evaluation. Most of those projects that either have been addressed or are being addressed. And so this comment was asking that we consider doing that prioritization for the rest of Warm Springs Creek. And on Rock Creek, there was a comment submitted for additional funding to Rock Creek because they do have a number of projects that are ready to go. And this comment is actually from Child Unlimited, and I'm sure Morgan will talk about it. But they also have brought a considerable amount of match to the Rock Creek drainage on their projects that are working. On aquatic flow projects, we received 2 comments on aquatic flow, actually, three comments, no, excuse me, 2 comments. And they were for Silver Lake. It's just in this upper corner right here, the left circle, and then Jeremy Gulch, which is a tributary to Silverbow Creek upstream of Anaconda area. The Silver Lake comment recognized the opportunities that Silver Lake provides, that water, the opportunity it provides to the Clark Fork River. And the comment was that we should continue to pursue this as an opportunity. This project is eligible. It's already incorporated and already something that we have been working on within the implementation of the restoration plan. If you remember, back in 2000, I believe it was 19, and again in 2021, we did do some pilot study releases from Silver Lake, where Butte Silverbow released water to the Clark Fork during those low years. So it is eligible and is part of the restoration plan. In German Gulch, there's a proposal. There is a irrigation diversion right at the mouth of German Gulch before it goes into Silverbow Creek. There's a proposal to let the water go into Silverbow Creek so that cold clean water from German Gulch goes into Silverbow Creek and has positive benefits to the aquatic life instead of routing that water off into an irrigation ditch where it goes downstream for some distance. The proposal is actually to move that irrigation diversion downstream on Silverbow Creek now that Silverbow Creek is cleaned up, and so that cold clean water can make it into German Gulch. Once again, this project is included in the restoration plan already, and it is eligible. And NRDP staff are working with Trout Unlimited on trying to move this project forward. One of the other projects that you'll hear about during the project presentation is a microbial or a geochemical and microbial study in the Upper Clark Fork River, Silverbow Creek, and Blacktail Creek. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this study because I don't understand it all, But it is a multi-year study, by Montana Tech, to look at water quality and chemistry, study the microbial communities within the watershed, so we have a better understanding of the stream health and the watershed health. This project is eligible under the monitoring / research portion of the restoration plan. It's something that, we continue to do, with the implementation to always, look at trying to improve what we're doing and make sure that we're doing the right thing. On the terrestrial side, we did receive one or two comments. One, that, in the timber feud area, and that's on the red circle on the right of your slide, that's south of Butte. And the other, comment was associated with, the Anaconda uplands there, or it's not the Anaconda uplands, the Anaconda priority area, terrestrial priority area, near Anaconda. The timber butte, comment, in the Butte South area, request that we look at Timber Butte or the terrestrial area south of Timber Butte. This is the one project that is not eligible for funding associated with the restoration plan because it is outside of a priority landscape area. This area was assessed in 2011 by Fish, Wildlife and Parks. And because of its low ecological function and habitat fragmentation, it was not selected as a terrestrial priority area. So this project would not be eligible for funding under the current restoration plan. What we do is we do work with our partners in Fish, Wildlife and Parks to look at our prioritization plans and make sure they are up to date. We do note here that if it's determined that the terrestrial restoration plan does need to be updated, we could do that in the coming years. But what we wouldn't do is we wouldn't just look at this one area, we'd look at the entire basin to make sure that the prioritization plan for the entire basin is updated. The comment for the Anaconda priority landscape area was basically just supporting the conservation projects and options for land in this area. Once again, these projects are eligible. We always are working in these lands. Recreation projects. We did receive three recreation projects this year. And the project sponsors for these are all here today, and you will hear about them. So I'm just going to hit the high notes and let them talk more about the details of them. Powell County and Grant counties put in for a grant to inventory and identify potential recreational links between the sites along the river from Warm Springs to Drummond. They requested approximately $200,000 to kick off this work. They also noted in their application they have a grant in for over $600,000 from some other funding sources. And this project is eligible as in Section 5 of the restoration plan, which deals with or which identifies recreational type projects. And please note on the map on the right shows the approximate location of these projects. The second recreation project is the Silver Boat Greenway project. This is a 26-mile recreational or a trail corridor from Butte to Opportunity. There are 4 segments of this trail that have not been completed, and the Greenway Service District is requesting funds to complete those 4 trails, administrative fees, and through future operations. I should note that the initial request was for $9.2 million, and I know Dory will, and we actually handed out to each of you here on the council members on your desk, the revised request that the Greenway Service District provided to us last week for approximately $3.6 million. So that request has been revised to 2 trail segments plus some administrative fees and O&M fees for 5 years. So that when we're considering that in the revision to the restoration plans, we will consider their revised request. Once again, this project is eligible under Section 5 or within Section 5 of the restoration plan. And in the past, we have estimated approximately $13 million of the funds that have been allocated to the Greenway Service District actually have gone to the trail proper. We have funded the Greenway Service District for a lot of additional funding, one with the ecological aspects of the Greenway, or excuse me, of the Silverbow Creek cleanup and that type of thing. And Dory will give you more information on this project. The Middletown State Park, which is located on the map there up at the upper left of your map at the confluence of the Blackfoot and Park Fork River. Fish, Wildlife and Parks has requested funding to relocate the Overlook Trail. If you've ever been to the Middletown State Park, there's a bluff that overlooks or was above where the dam used to be. Fish, Wildlife and Parks constructed an overlook up there with interpretive signs. That's starting, actually, they did a geotechnical study that indicated that area is starting to fail, and Mike will go into this more. He's here to present this, but that predicted to fall into the river in about 5 years, or within 5 years. So for a safety provisions, they would like to move that back to a safe location. So they have requested some funding to do that. Their request was for $425,000. $225,000 of that would be for capital improvements to move the overlook back to a safe location, and $200,000 are for additional operation and maintenance funds for the park. Once again, this project is eligible in Section 5. Actually, the Middletown State Park has received funding in this current restoration plan in Section 5. Into total of the natural resource or the Upper Clark Fork River Restoration Funds have funded about $5 million to the development and maintenance of the Middletown State Park. The education project, the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program submitted a request. And you'll hear Raylene. Raylene is here to talk about this project. As most of you know, this program has been educating students within the Upper Clark Fork River Basin since 2004. They've requested $2.2 million to continue serving the students, and this would last approximately 4 years, providing them the time to carry out the funding strategy that they are currently implementing. And they would also assume their 50% match requirement that is currently in their contract. This project is eligible for funding, as we have funded this project in the past for a total of about $7 million since 2004, from the grants program, from administrative fees, and then finally from the process plan, and then in 2020, another $1 million is allocated. So that's the $7 million that's been allocated to the watershed education program. Comments and suggestions. So we also got some good comments and suggestions about the restoration plan, about where we should go. We had 5 comments of general support. There were 3 comments that we should continue to integrate and integrate restoration with remediation. One comment was specific to doing it with Butte Area 1, and there were 2 comments specifically asking for better integration or to continue to integrate with the Clark Fork River operable unit. The NRDP is actively doing this, and we support these comments. On the Clark Fork River, we are actively integrating this restoration plan with the restoration plan on the Clark Fork River, and with within Butte Area 1. We are currently following the Butte remedial design process and work plan development. So when they actually start working, we will be able to integrate restoration with those projects. So I would say that we're doing that. A comment was submitted on Blacktail Creek and Basin Creek. The comment was, these projects have taken several years. Let's get these going. NRDP agrees that some of these projects take longer than anticipated or longer than we would like. There are always landowner issues. There are permitting issues that take some projects longer. Or in the case of the Basin Creek project that was at the last bullet, the landowner has had to change in their schedule, so that project actually got taken off the books. So there are always, issues that come up. Not that we're happy with any of the delays, but we do try to push these projects as fast as possible. As Brian noted, the flow process needs to be revised, or we'd like to revise the flow process. And there are two comments in support of that. To create more, flexibility in the development and the implementation of these flow projects. We agree with this, and over the course of the last 10 years that we've been implementing this plan, we recognize that this process needs to catch up to where we are today. So we will be providing language for a new flow process. There were two comments that, or excuse me, there's two comments recommending allocation of funding to the main stem diversions. This is a project that Andy Fisher will be talking about. In 2018, we integrated into the restoration plan, being able to work on main stem diversions for fish passage, flow, and recreational passage. We did not allocate any funding to it. This comment is asking that we allocate funding to that. One comment also requested that we, oh no, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. And then the one comment did note that there were matching funds available for this. Once again, these projects are eligible. It's just a matter that we didn't allocate any funding to it in 2018. There was one comment that asked us to focus the unallocated funding, and I'll talk about that unallocated funding at the end of this meeting, that we focus that upstream of Garrison to those terrestrial and aquatic priorities upstream where a lot of the injury has occurred. I would note that approximately 75% of the funding for this fund, the Upper Clark Fork River Basin Restoration Fund, has been spent upstream of, either has been spent or allocated to projects upstream of Garrison. Downstream of Garrison, there are also some very high priority streams that Fish, Wildlife and Parks has identified, i.e. Flint Creek, Rock Creek, Gold Creek, that are going to help us meet the goals of the restoration plan. These streams and these areas and those habitats provide a lot of terrestrial and aquatic life to the upper basin. One comment from Trout Unlimited, who has done a very good job of encouraging matching funds in their projects, as well as some of our other, most of our other partners, recommends that we put in some kind of either encouragement or requirement for matching funds, noting that the restoration funds are limited. We don't have enough restoration funds to do all the restoration in the basin. So we really should be leveraging as much matching funds as we can. And this comment suggested that, and NRDP agrees with that, and we are working on developing that type of language. Then there was also comments on fishery investigation and monitoring going on. As some of you have seen in the paper recently, the fishery population in the Upper Clark Fork River is at historic lows right now. And yes, there is a big question why that is. And these two comments were suggesting that we allocate some funding to do that. NRDP agrees with that, and it is eligible for funding within the current restoration plans and in section 3 of the restoration plan. So you will probably see that when the draft plan comes out for public comment as well. So that's all I had on the response to comments. If anybody has any questions to me on our responses, if not, we will get into the project sponsors. We're going to do a few of the project sponsors. We'll take a break and then we'll come back and do a few of the next ones. Are there any questions of me on our response to comments?
I just wanted, Steve helped Anaconda. You mentioned just minutes ago some incentives for matching funds from other partners. What kind of, just briefly, what might that be?
Well, it could be as easy as, for instance, in the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program, there's a requirement in their contract that they provide 50%. You know, we could add something like that to contracts or to projects. The incentive is, you know, I'm struggling with some of that because we have some very high priority projects that may not get a lot of match. And you don't want to just do low priority projects that have a lot of match, because then your high priority project still doesn't get done. So that's a tough balance. We are talking with our partners and others about that. Whether or not you just put a specific match requirement out there, and see if we can get to it. That would be that's something that I've been thinking about more and more, is that we should just put a match out there and say, you know, if we're gonna develop these, most of these projects take a while to develop anyways. And most of our project partners, the WRC, Trout Unlimited and the Coalition, all have resources and have brought a lot of match to a lot of the projects. So it's just a matter of getting it more formalized. Bad answer, sorry, Steve. That's fine.
Christie Beal, to follow up on that question, you said that there are some high priority projects that can't get a lot of match. Why not?
But I shouldn't say they can't, but they may not.
I might have said that.
Yeah, they may not get a lot of match. And in a lot of our cases, more recently though, we have been giving, you know, project partners have been going out and getting NRCS matching or, you know, under the new infrastructure bill. I know Trout Unlimited brought in over $500,000 to the Warm Springs drainage for projects, so.
But my question is why? If it's a high priority project, are they not getting a match because somebody's not trying? Are they not getting a match for some other technical reason? Why are they not getting a match?
Don't know. I can't give you a good answer on that, Chrissy.
Okay.
I guess what I was getting at when I was trying to explain that is that I would like, the one thing that we don't want to do is fund lower priority projects and leave the highest priority project out there. So, I would say, you know, an example of that, you know, but would be the Allendale fish screen on Flint Creek. We worked with the NRC very closely to put that project together. Yeah, we didn't get a lot of match for that project. And that's probably bad on us because we were the leads on that. You know, several projects Brian's worked on the Clark Fork or on the Cottonwood Creek up here. The WRC has brought in significant match to those projects. So, yeah, maybe it is just as easy as putting a requirement out there like we thought. So. Yeah, Brian has a comment.
This is Brian Markrack, Natural Resource Damage Program. I would just add that a lot of these grants and match requirements have very specific things that they are looking for to meet whatever goals of that grant are. And just trying to get the goals of that grant to line up with our priority project can be challenging at times.
Any other questions from council or from the public?
How about online, Brian? Is anybody online? So. Nathan, now you gotta go off and help. Doris?
Sorry, Chairman, members of the advisory council, this is just a process question. Because you do have a time associated with these agenda items and people are not expected to attend the meeting. As far as I'm concerned, it's great that we're 15 minutes ahead, but what if those folks are intending to be here for this next section of the meeting?
Well, I mean, we can, I think, you know, I think we can start these presentations. The order, just to let folks know, the order of the presentations was totally dictated by myself. I did it arbitrarily, but I did it by the how people submitted them to me when I asked for the presentations. So Fish, Wildlife and Parks and Mike Castudio will go first. Morgan Chase with TU will go second. Andy Fisher with the coalition will go, the Clarkport Coalition will go after that. Then Dory, the Greenway, Amanda, with Powell County, Ted Dodd, WRC, Ray Lynn with the Clarkport Watershed Education Program, and Paul, with Montana Tech on the microbial, study will go last. So that's the order of that, and we'll see how our technical difficulties go here, Dory, but we might be right on schedule.
No, and I appreciate that, and I mean, I just, you know, for the benefit of folks that did invite people to attend this meeting and feel confident, I just wasn't certain, you know, sometimes when you get too far ahead, we're gonna use the possibility for coming. I'm far enough down the list that I'm confident in my votes will be here, so I'm just being selfish, thank you.
We're not that far. Where I see us is 5 minutes ahead. Or 10 minutes ahead, right? So, what's that?
Is Mike first?
Yes, Mike is first.
Which one is this?
Yeah. So Mike is sitting. So that being said, we can take a short break. Let's just make sure we're sitting back at our seats at 2, a little after 2 to make sure that we're, back. So thank you for your comment, Dory. No.
How are you?
Got winter now. Lots of, I think I counted 3 times.
Well, I mean, like I said, Take your seat again, please.
Start getting started.
Let's start with.
Thanks, Doug. Doug mentioned my name is Mike Castidia. My post job title is Recreation Manager with my department. I've been with the agency for about 12 years. But I was hired as the and after been funded from NRDP. Today I'm here to talk about the overlook. Now part of the state park. Done this construction that wasn't built by actually back in the day. Because it was gonna be spot. Part of the remediation, they were gonna have a spot where you could watch the whole cleanup happen and gather, everything takes longer than you think, and usually you think, and that rate was finished in 2011, and it was handed off to anyway. I'll just keep talking while I keep going on. My time's running. So the overlook is located on a 200-foot bluff above the Park Fork Blackwood River. We have this amazing view of the confluence of those now undammed confluence. And also you have had a view here at least of the former dam site itself. All right, and here's the map. And so folks in the Zoom audience, pointing out the different parts of it here. This is our latest development. It's called the trail. It's called the Flats. Trails that lead out to the tunnel and then lead up to the overall confluence area. Campsite is right in here. Then what we call the gateway. Confluence area is probably see our most visitation there, but most of that is in 2 months during what we call the 2 patch, which is anything. 50,000 people just passed through the area in July and August. The overlook itself is here, so this was the piece of the park that was opened. Well, and it has had a lot of great use ever since. Here you can see some of it. It's just a great spot for telling stories about the cleanup. Had many groups coming out. The UCFRB, which is from today. This was the Confederate Culture Camp in Cashola from the Salish Culture Committee. Wildflower walk we had. Wintertime, it sees use throughout the years. This was snowshoe. A lot of great use. What draws people there, of course, is just this kind of panoramic view of the 2 rivers down on what was the former dam site. But as I mentioned, it's really important to tell stories about the cleanup itself and about the historic nature of the confluence. These were the panels. These are PDFs of the panels that were currently at the overlook, not accessible at this moment. There's half a dozen panels. Starting with one on the cultural landscape from the Salish perspective. We were the culture committee on that one. This one here is just kind of the history of industry and William A. Clark, the building of the Milltown Dam, the epic 1908 flood that started this whole. And then there are 4 other interpretive panels that just focused on the whole Superfund process from remediation all the way through redevelopment. In recent years, though, there have been some issues, geologic ones, to be exact. This is the bluff here, the Clark Fork River. I'm not a geologist, but we have a couple different kinds of rock here. We also know that the Lewis Park Fault kind of passed through this area. For years, it's been well known that there was a tension crack down below the bluff. But we had monitored it for years and just been basically told to proceed with caution. More recently, in 2021, we had a new crack appear right on the other side of the fence at the overlook exhibit area. And just last summer, that crack expanded enough that it even undermined part of our asphalt trail. When we saw that, we're like, okay, we gotta shut her down and figure this out. So after that, we hired a geotech consultant, Terrestrial, and they came out and did some kind of on-site assessments and reviewed a lot of the literature that had come on before. And the upshot is that free-flowing river is undermining the bluff now. That's not a bad thing necessarily, but, and the river had always been pounding that bluff. The two rivers come together. Our point is basically right here at this bluff face. Also, probably a factor in it in 1908 and 1909, the Milwaukee Road was being built through there, and originally it was going to go around the bluff face. We have some amazing old photos of steam shovels in the riverbed digging away the toe of the slope. So then about that time, the dam was finished, in 1908. Was somewhat protected by the dam all those years. And then when the dam came out, the rivers, you can see in this here, it's kind of hard to read, but that's what undermines the current hitting that toe of the slope. Rock itself, and again, I'm not a geologist, but it is just a jumble of fractured rock, basically, and it's not stable to begin with. So nature is having its way, and anyway, we've got to figure out a new game plan. So just a few key recommendations, as I mentioned, the river is largely believed to be river erosion. Some of the cracks are posing a serious hazard for public safety. In fact, the tunnel that goes through the bluff, which was built after the 1908 flood because they had to tunnel through the bluff as opposed to going around it. We once had great hopes, at least, that tunnel would be able to be fixed up enough that you can allow public passage through it. This new report, that idea is dead. It's not gonna happen. The northwest end of the tunnel, which is about the length of it is 700 feet. The northern 100 feet or so of the tunnel is in serious hazard of possibly collapsing and bringing down parts of the bluff with it. So the geotech consultants recommended that we close the tunnel off and kind of seal it off in a permanent way. It's currently gated on both ends, and only the most committed of graffiti artists really can get in there. We still deal with that, but we've not been going in it since we received this report. But the geotech recommended that we seal off the north end. Of that 700 feet, about 550 feet of the tunnel. 1 minute? Yikes, okay. One way we would seal it off is with ecology blocks, and that's stacking it inside the tunnel. They also recommended fencing and additional signage, which we have already got a start on. So this is currently what the overlook looks like. It is fenced off, and this fences off the tunnel area down below. Our project goals, basically, we just want to hang on to our overlook. This is an incredibly valuable recreational and educational asset. Thousands of kids from basically grade school through grad school have come out there to study the cleanup, the river restoration work that's gone on there. We have asked for $225,000 for the actual work itself, so that's for the work, relocating the overlook and also sealing off the tunnel in a safe way. And then we have also asked for an additional $200,000 in operational support. Question?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Think we maybe could have done some better research before you located it there. Since we didn't, what assurances can you give us that the new location is truly a better location?
Sure.
For more than 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, so there had been some geotech studies done when they built the overlook. And this predates FWP, predates my
Sure,
involvement.
I'm not looking backwards, I'm looking forward. What guarantees, assurances, whatever, can you tell us
Yeah.
about the new site? That this is what good money spent in the new location?
Right, so the report, which I'd be happy to share with you, does talk about that, and the recommendation was push it back about 75 feet. Different geology, basically, different rock, far more stable. And our consultant seemed very confident that if we just relocated it, wouldn't have that same stellar view that it does right on the cliff edge, you know, because there you can see the dam site and the confluent. If you push it back 100 feet, you still have an amazing view of the confluent.
And that active free flowing river is not going to take out enough of that, what you said has always been unstable rock. Such that we'll be doing this again once that unstable rock has been removed.
Not a geologist, but we only rely on our geotech consultants, and that's what he's told us, that is a stable spot.
Yes, please, I would love that person's name. And
Okay.
number. You don't have to give it to me now, but yeah,
Doug has a copy of the report too, but I'd be happy to get it to you.
thank you.
I know it's got a lot of value and it's to the remediation and restoration program, but capital improvements and appropriate use of the NRD funds.
So I guess this is Doug Martin. I guess that's the question for
And
me.
this is Steve Hill.
Yeah. So yes, it would be. I mean, that's what we have done in the past, funding different, recreational, type projects or, this type of facility. It does, park projects in general, provide access that, to folks to view the restoration. They also actually help protect the restoration, by having established trails and that type of thing. So the people aren't wandering all over the restored areas. So there is that aspect of it that, does support the restoration.
Margie, Christian, if that's as unstable as you're saying, could it just crumble and you go down into the river?
Back up here. So the part that's unstable is from here and then out of the picture. What would it be? The northwest end is the one that's at the greatest risk. And it could, he thought possibly within 5 years that, and it's kind of this time of year that it's the greatest worry, short of, a big earthquake. When you're coming off the heels of a winter, all the freeze thaw, lots of rain, moisture, and then you've got, the river hitting the toe of the slope. And so that's why we've just kind of closed off certain areas. And based on the recommendation of the geotech, identified an area that could work as an overlook still.
Okay, so would it, if that crumbled, then you'd have a better view from the new.
Put a trail over the top of it, it'd be awesome.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Is the request for funds for 100% of the project cost, or is the Montana State Park System going to be open to pay for part of it and O&M?
it's looking to NRD for support for that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yours? All right,
Thank you very much, Mike.
thank you.
This is, Doug. We will move on to the next speaker, and that's Morgan Case. As Nathan gets this up and then Morgan comes up, I will let you know that at the Parkport Science Forum, there was a meeting that was held in Missoula a couple weeks ago. The professors at the university did this thing that they called lightning talks. They had their students come up and they gave them 5 minutes. And their slides were they're already preset time to roll forward on their PowerPoint. Those students got up there and did their 5-minute presentation. And for those of you who were here or there, saw it, it was a pretty amazing, little presentation. So you guys got your work cut up for you.
It stressed me out watching that. I was like, is it, because you didn't know which slide they were on, so you didn't know if they were on time or not.
This is Christy Beal. That's why we did this to the clicker. To add that level of stress for you. Just kidding.
Isn't help with that?
The folks online are having trouble hearing it and not smart enough to figure that part out.
Is that where they're from?
They should be hearing from both of them.
What if I move this up to the speaker and then somebody asks questions?
Yeah.
Go right here, Brian.
Is that any better online?
We don't have it up here now.
Yeah.
Anybody online sound any better?
Little bit.
That's not the one. I don't know why this keeps happening.
Folks, I'll tell you right now, this is Christy Beal speaking. We're probably gonna skip our 2:45 to 2:55 break to try to stay. Because we're gonna start getting behind a little bit here. So as we're having technical difficulties, if you choose to zip out to use the restroom, be sure to zip back in quickly because we'll start going as soon as, we probably won't do the later break.
Dream about that wolf.
Good afternoon. My name is Morgan Case. I'm an in-stream flow specialist for Trout Unlimited. First off, I just want to thank NRDP and the council for the opportunity to provide comment on the restoration plan. TU's been a partner in development and implementation of the plan for over a decade. We're as committed to the goals of the plan as well. I don't know, we don't need to have a fight about who's more committed, but we're also committed to the goals of the restoration plan. We've been working in partnership with NRD in the Flint and Rock Creek drainage, the Little Blackfoot headwaters tributaries above Deer Lodge, and the main stem of Clark Fork above Deer Lodge, and to conserve and protect the values of the fisheries there. We're focusing usually on restoring, reconnecting, and rewatering those tributaries for migratory trout and native species. I just have pictures. I don't really have much to show, just to keep your, maybe the wolves, that's scary and stuff, but I just want to kind of go over the general tenor of our comments, just so that I can provide you an opportunity to ask questions if you have them up to you. We have basically 5 kind of comment or 5 topics. The first one is that we are focusing on like to see an improvement, like Doug said, in streamlining of the in-stream flow projects. I feel like those are one of the more challenging things to accomplish as part of the restoration plan, and providing flexibility and kind of a spaced approach to that is something that we think would be beneficial to implementing in-stream flow projects on the ground, including potentially supporting that German Gulch source switch, which is in the development and exploration phase. We'd also like to support that critical or funding for the critical research on the fishery because of those concerns we're seeing about fish numbers being at record lows. And so any support that NRDP can provide to answer those questions is of high value for us and for the resource. And we also recognize that, as Doug said, there's more work to be done and there's funding available and the cost of everything has gone up. And we really would like to see a commitment to reach the goals, the fishery goals of the program, not just spend out the money of the program. And so where possible, where NRD can provide impetus or support for leveraging partners like TU, leveraging matching funds, hopefully that will maximize the impact of the funds that NRD has. And so we can reach those fishery goals. Like he said, like the outside funding we have in Rock Creek, where those projects may be lower priority, but they are a high priority for other partners and other funders. Using a little bit of NRD money to get a big bang for everyone's buck is, I think, important. We're also, as Doug said, we have leveraged a lot of funding for Passage and Warm Springs Creek, and we're really would like to see a habitat assessment and prioritization, because as the fish are having more free access to that habitat, identifying where there are problem areas and improving that already fairly high quality habitat that's kind of a stronghold for the bull trout is very important. We think that that should be a priority for NRDP funding. And then providing matching funds for the main stem screening, Passage, recreational boat improvement opportunities. That would be a way, because sometimes we would like to do projects and we have funders and we're limited by state matching funds. So where NRDP and the decision makers can help move money that way, we can get a lot accomplished if we have access to those matching funds. That was it. So I just wanted to be available for questions. If anyone had any questions about TU's comments or our work in the basin, please feel free to ask. And if I don't know the answer, I will try to find it.
Excuse me, do you see any steep hill? Anaconda. Do you see any conflicts between the habitat restoration and some of the remediation practices that you can see suggest improvements?
I think that I personally am an stream flow person, so I don't have as much knowledge about that. But I think there are questions that deserve more interrogation about those. I know, the riparian vegetation and recovery. I know that's been a concern, but I think there's, those things should be researched or considered. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Easy peasy. Thank you.
Next up is Andy.
I warmed up.
Thank you, Morgan.
Watch the cords, Andy. Especially.
This will be quick. I can't stand too long.
You want to sit?
No, I'm fine, actually. I had knee surgery last week, so. Come over here with, give me something with George here.
You do a test for us, please, Andy, just to.
Test.
Better or worse online?
Can anybody online hear us?
Same.
Same.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Andrew Fisher with the Clarksburg Coalition here in Deer Lodge, and with me I have Gordon Green, from the city of Deer Lodge as well, and just wanted to provide some context on one of the abstracts that we submitted. It was a project idea related to restoration work on Lower Cottonwood Creek. And this picture on our right here is actually a former NRDP grants project that enhanced this park, not too far from where we are in this room, on Cottonwood Creek. And as part of that, there weren't necessarily habitat improvements to the riparian habitat, but it doesn't look too shabby in this picture, actually. I'm gonna let Jordan give a quick little overview of some of kind of the general project area here.
Absolutely. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm members of the council. Like Andy said, my name is Jordan Green. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the city of Deer Lodge. I worked closely with Andy and the Park Fork Coalition on achieving a resolution of support from the city council back in February in support of this project. That resolution passed unanimously. As you can see here, this is a map of the Cottonwood Creek corridor throughout Deer Lodge. It is a urbanized environment for this creek, and it's therefore faced a lot of issues with natural riparian habitats, fisheries, and flooding damage. And so because of those things, the city has seen clear support in need of reestablishing natural riparian habitat, both to mitigate the flood damage that we've seen throughout the town and also to reestablish public access to natural resources. We've created a flood mitigation policy for Cottonwood Creek, and those measures are addressed in our growth policy as well. And since the creation of those documents, we've been heavily invested in acquiring properties along Cottonwood Creek for demolition of buildings using FEMA dollars to basically increase the capacity of the floodplain, but also provide the greater benefit of creating a system of parks and trails along the creek that members of the community may be able to access in order to, gain access to natural resources and see what a really nice riparian habitat can look like. City's acquired 9 properties along the creek in that time frame, and has begun work in our Parks and Trails plan of establishing trails and parks along that. In fact, just last night, the city council approved unanimously for a local foundation, the Brianna Rome Memorial Foundation, to establish a park along Cottonwood Creek, a memorial park for the Brianna Rome, who is a young woman that tragically passed away in Deer Lodge last year. And this memorial park is just the first step of using a city-owned piece of property to create a quiet place for reflection along the park. And by being able to reestablish the natural riparian and fishery resources in this area, we see as a really important benefit for the city, for this reflective park, and for just the community as a whole. So I just wanted to be here today to stand in support of our core coalition's proposal, and hand it over to Andy unless you had anything else you wanted to say.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Jordan. Advance the slide here. There we go. Maybe I'm just a little far away with the clicker here.
That's how it will look like.
Just to piggyback on what Jordan had to say with this opportunity with some of these city and county owned properties along Cottonwood Creek, a lot of these lots are sitting vacant. There's a history of flood damage on a lot of these properties. And really what we're trying to do is to support goals of improving some of the habitat diversity, riparian habitat, and providing some thermal refuge in this lower 1 mile of Cottonwood Creek. We understand this is one of the many priorities in Cottonwood Creek, that some of the highest priorities are in-stream flow, which we greatly support, fish and treatment projects, many of which have happened upstream, and there's been significant progress made on those priorities. I guess our request is that all the priority limiting factors and priorities in Cottonwood be considered, because there are some time-sensitive opportunities and ability for the Park Fork Coalition to go after matching funds to begin to address some of the habitat issues that are problem there. So thank you for your time on the Cottonwood Creek aspect, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And I'm going to speak very quickly to one additional comment. I can advance the slides here.
Left leg, Andy, left leg.
They're not seeing it.
It's not sure.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I just wanted to touch on an ongoing project that was initiated by Clark Coalition and Trout Unlimited in about 2017, identifying numerous fish passage barriers and entrainment risks on the main stem. Clark Fork River, we identified 8 major barriers, as I believe Doug and Brian may have alluded to earlier. Next slide. These barriers present impacts to fish passage and recreation. And we've been working since that time with our partners to address, next slide. 4 of the 8 barriers on the main stem that are major irrigation diversion structures. We've done rehabilitated and improved these sites for still allowing for irrigation use, but allowing for fish to be able to move past these diversions, as well as recreation. And so this has opened up a great deal of habitat on the main stem as well as the tributaries. And our specific comment was providing some dedicated funding towards this effort. We've successfully secured over $1 million in match to date on our first 4 diversion projects, and we have dedicated match secured for up to $150,000 a year for potentially the remaining projects. And we have other additional match sources we'll be pursuing, and having secured match in place from NRDP would help us be able to get other match sources in place to complete this remaining effort. That's it. If there's any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Mick has a question.
Mick Rimstock?
Yeah.
Is Charles Limited part of that match?
Correct. They've provided match through their chapters. We've received chapter match on some of those initial 4 irrigation structure upgrades from the George Grant chapter and West Slope chapters at Trout Unlimited, and they've helped us write some of the grants that we've received through Fish and Wildlife Service and others. I think on one project, we had 5 different sources of funding trying to come together to make it possible. So
The reason I asked you that was it just got $20 million for fish passage, donation.
yeah, we've been looking into some of those programs too.
And thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions for Andy? Council or public?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Dory, you're up.
If anyone wants a copy of my PowerPoint presentation, the advisory council members have had, it's been distributed, that they're actually there. Thank you. That commercial. Run on full screen. If you don't care, I guess I don't care.
Let's go with winter way to this story, so we don't have to, it may not work otherwise.
Good afternoon, members of the advisory council, members of the public, and supporters of the Silverbow Creek Greenway. My name is Dory Spruker. I work for the city and county of Butte Silverbow, and since 1998, I've worked on the Silverbow Creek Greenway project and have been its project manager since about the 2000s. The NRDP has awarded this project starting in 2000, $23 million. The project entails obviously the road from Butte to Opportunity, Montana. In 1998, when we commenced the preliminary design of the project, the vision statement was imagine a greenway 26 miles in length along the Silver Grove Creek corridor with clean water and abundance of spring-fed vegetation, linear parks, trails, wildlife habitat areas, preserved historic sites, and resulting economic development. So our project goals have been that investment to get us towards that vision, including restored streamside, wetlands, riparian, and uplands ecosystem. We were lucky enough to have a great partnership with the Natural Resource Damage Program and with the Department of Environmental Quality, where we wove the project together and implemented restoration at the same time as remedy. So the project wouldn't have been as successful as it was if it hadn't been for that cooperation. Almost exclusively, the Greenway Service District was charged with securing access through either purchase, easement acquisition, and to protect those stored or those restored areas by virtue of ownership and or easement. The Department of Environmental Quality got thousands of acres through the settlement with Atlantic Richfield Company, but there were still private inholdings that had to be secured. Primarily, the protection of this corridor, first and foremost, is through ownership. So the Greenway Service District, the city of and county of Beach Silver Bow, and the DEQ are the primary owners along the corridor. The intention, I noticed Doug, when he refers to this in his comments, in 2010, yes, we came back to the Natural Resource Damage Program for a lump sum fund to complete the project in 2010. In 2010, we had no idea that remedy was going to continue for the next 10 years. In 2000, we've been in land acquisition and access negotiations on a number of these properties coming up to last year with the Department of Transportation, the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, with other private landowners. This continues, and it's been arduous. I'm not a real estate agent, and this property is not for sale. So it took a lot of trust building, trades, partnerships, to make those things happen and protect this corridor. There are still lands. In fact, I've checked with Atlantic Richfield today. There are a number of parcels north of Highway 1, which is in opportunity, that have yet to be transferred to the Department of Environmental Quality, who is holding the property on behalf of the Natural Resource Damage Program. It was part of the settlement that $1 million for the property would go to the NRD. Also, there's a couple hundred acres close to Randley that are still unresolved that haven't been transferred. These actually are outside of our hands. From what I understand, it's a pretty high level discussion about how that's going to move forward and how that transfer is going to happen. So we've had to move around. We've had to be able to pivot when necessary to build in those locations that were shovel ready. So we have jumped around. But what has happened is those 2010 dollars today are only worth 52 to 59 cents. So our buying power has been so severely impacted by time. Here's a little pie chart that a friend of mine put together for me. So I mentioned we had total grant funding of almost 24 million. Of that, about $7 million was spent directly on restoration. A lot of that implemented directly by the Department of Environmental Quality. About $7 million of that were these long negotiations, these hard decisions, all the legal requirements, the documentation, the legal services, all those things, reviewing through. We did a complicated land exchange with Montana Department of Environmental Quality that included a private party. Not only did our legal review it, their legal reviewed it. Things, kind of go in a circle until you get to the point where everybody's satisfied. At the end of, right now, we stand at about $1.4 million. At the end of this year, fiscal year, or at the end of 2020, we will have about $664,000 to move forward. When we submitted our application to the Natural Resource Damage Program in response to their request, we asked for $9.2 million. We want to build out this project. We want to take care of this project. We want to get this project done. It's a legacy for us. It's a legacy for DEQ and the NRD. We had no idea how much money was actually available. So thankfully, Doug and the staff from the NRD came to us and asked us to reconsider and resubmit a smaller plan. You've all got that detailed in front of you. And so we're looking at the next 2 years, our priority projects. The first priority project is this Durant Canyon project, which is going to be incredible. At the advice of the NRD, we slimmed down the investment at a trailhead. We think people deserve that. As it's a 4-mile segment, we have a trailhead at the end at Fairmont. We have a similar one that we built just this last year there. We decreased a lot of the impacts or the soft surface trails, understanding that we probably weren't going to need that. It was probably overestimated, deleted picnic tables, interpretive features, and that ultimately reduces the mold bonding and insurance requirements and design contingencies. The second project is the Highway 1 underpass to the street I mentioned earlier. We're still hoping that this project will come online. It's still uncertain. The property's not resolved, but we did realign the trail so it didn't cross the creek, eliminated the bridge, and a number of other things that ultimately resulted in a project of about $658,000. And our other request in our original proposal was 10 years of operations management and maintenance and administration. We've cut that down in half to a 5-year. Oh, that's the end. So in a wrap up, we really appreciate that the NRD reached out to us. We had a really honest and helpful conversation. We think this is an important project to finish for all of our communities. And I really appreciate you allowing us to submit this amendment. Thanks.
Thank you for your time. Hey, this is Doug. Are there any questions for the council with authority? We're council members first.
I have a question. Sure, this is Christy Beal. We've got, I guess my question is about the reliability of numbers. I mean, in 2010, it sounds like the length of time was not calculated into what it would actually take to finish the project, and the fact that property values would increase probably wasn't taken into account as much as it sounds like those were factors, at least in the 2010 ask not being sufficient to finish the project. And then we've gone from 9.2 to, is it 3.2 now? 3.4. That's a significant reduction in dollars. Tell me about, is this reduced request expected to be able to finish the project?
This reduced request has taken into consideration inflation over some time because we've set that out over a schedule. This is only 2 of the unfinished projects. We still have 2 other segments that have yet to be completed. But yes, our expectations are that these funds will be sufficient. I mean, if we're not waiting another 10 years, I mean, the total impact on inflation and the total impact on construction costs over that period of time from 2010 to 2022 was unfathomable. No one in their right mind would have ever expected it. And we didn't expect it to. What we've done is we've brought forward our estimates to our most recent estimate or bid that we received in February this year for our ongoing project now. Look at some factor, it's not a huge factor, but some factor of inflation that's going to take into consideration, yes, what time impacts have on the power, the buying power of the golf.
So this 3.4 ask is expected to finish 2 of some of the remaining projects.
Right.
Okay, when you say some of the remaining projects, I guess I'm trying to figure out, 2010, we thought it was X. Now we're here at 9.2, now to 3.4. I'm trying to project out, like, what does the future look like as far as requests go, and what kind of a commitment can we get if funds are awarded for what this money will do?
Well, you will have our commitment that these two projects, project 1 and project 2, will be completed with these funds. What we did look at in this project, and we made some modifications after conversation and requests from our colleagues in the Natural Resource Damage Program. It is not unusual, and I can honestly say, we created this plan in 1998. Things changed. Things changed with the way DEQ approached the property. Things changed about the way that we had an idea in 1998. That's where that estimate, that original estimate came from. It would have to be revised, re-looked at every time we looked at a project. We did a deep dive in 2010 when we tried to parse out what we were, what our long-term expectations were. If we had had the interest from that $8 million from 2010, we wouldn't have to be here to ask for this. But we didn't have that water under the bridge. We want to make certain that the restorations that the investments that both DEQ has made in remedy, what the NRD and the Greenway in partnership have done in restoration, and that to be able to provide access to a corridor of resources that never looked like this in 100 years. I mean, I refer to Greg's, comments about access. Access features also protect the resource. So it's protecting that investment. And that's why that's so critical. Long answer to two short questions. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mike Pappos.
I'm just a member of.
My apologies.
Hang on, it's a council's, we'll open it up to public. Okay.
Pappos, how much participation from Deer Lodge County has been in the Greenway corridor? Because quite a bit of this project does reside in Deer Lodge County, if I'm mistaken.
No.
Or is it all in Silver Bow?
No, a significant portion. It's about 13% in Deer Lodge County, and the other remainder is in Silver Lake.
Has there been any participation from them by manpower or dollars?
The Greenway Service District is a multi-jurisdictional service district. We have board members that represent both Anaconda, Deer Lodge, and Beat Silver Bow on this council. So discussions about this corridor since, for many years. They include a representative of their council commissioners and Beat Silver Bows. We have a local government employee and an ADL employee, and then two members from the public that are, that represent the community in that participation. And then the other 9th member is kind of oddball, waving back and forth, sort of thing, alternates, so that one or the other has a majority. Can I speak to your question about Anaconda, Deer Lodge? Do you mind?
Let's keep it real brief.
Okay. I can honestly tell you that never in the history of the Greenway Service District board meetings have they ever distinguished between Silver Bow County and Deer Lodge County. You can't do it. It's a lineal corridor. And so everyone has worked together to make certain that we get this project done. So we have support from both counties.
Sorry. Mick Ringstock from Silverville County. In April of 2022, you asked for $2,396,000. And now it's $3,471,000. And I know inflation's been bad, but inflation's like $150,000, $2,700,000. So what's the additional $700,000?
I'm sorry, Chairman, members of the advisory council, Mr. Ringsack. We did talk about the shortfalls in our construction project in 2022. We did not request funds at that time. That was a result of a really serious concern about our remaining money and how we were going to move forward. The results of this and the resulting $9.2 million project was supported. In fact, this included everything that we had ever planned. And so, and the board's decision was to do that. So that's that big jump. Backing it down to the 3.4, 3.5 has been endorsed by by the Greenway Service District Board. We've talked to them about some of the modifications that we made. So that's, those numbers don't.
We have another question from council, and you can ask if you can direct your answer straight to their question. We're running out of time. Go ahead, Steve.
Steve Hill from Anaconda. What's the status of the segment between Ramsey and Miles Crossing? Is that?
There are still, land issues associated with it. We own about, UCFRB actually, secured that property a couple of years ago. We have a couple of miles of it, that could be built, but it's like a big court. It's privately owned, it's owned by Atlantic Richfield Company. It's got some, issues associated with the land transfer. I don't know if Amy knows too much about it yet, but she's gonna learn, but yeah, so that's something that when we looked through and prioritized the project, we looked realistically at what we could do. 1, 2, 3.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions from council? If not, we're gonna open that up to public. I know that we had one gentleman with a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry I spoke out.
You're fine.
I know you guys have.
What's your name, sir?
Keep it short. I'm a huge citizen. I use the trail a great deal.
Sir, what's your name?
Al Kesselheim.
Thank
I
you.
live in Butte. And I just want to speak in support of completion of the trail and however that gets done. I know there are a lot of items on the agenda, worthy causes. I think the Greenway Trail is unique for its vision. I think it's a pretty inspiring vision to have downtown Butte all the way to the Warm Springs Ponds as a continuous trail that people can recreate on. Even though it's only partially done, it gets a whole lot of use already. And I just think it's one of those parts of this big pie that you guys are all hoping with that really has long-lasting kind of visionary impact. That so much of the remediation that goes on in conjunction with the Superfund process is kind of behind closed doors, or it's stuff like water monitoring or moving dirt here and there. This is a very tangible, kind of powerful resource that people can use and will use, and will really promote people wanting to come to this part of the state and help us get off of that bugaboo of being the Superfund site and rather being a place that people really want to come to live and recreate. So that's what I wanted to say.
Any other comments from public?
My old man, I'm chairman of the Greenway Service District, former planning director in Anaconda. I just wanted to comment that Anaconda is no longer a smoking town. Anaconda has become a recreational town, tourist town. And we followed the remediation downstream of Butte. Right now, we're in the process of doing a project in Deer Lodge County. We've had a lot of criticism from Anaconda residents that we're not doing any work in Deer Lodge County, but now we are. And this second phase of that we're requesting takes us into opportunity. And that would be a connection then that people are looking for. And there's been more bikers and more hikers coming out of Anaconda lately than we've ever seen. Because that's what it's coming to. The young people are coming in, they're recreating. And that's what we want to get this finished so they can take advantage of that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Council or public? Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amanda Lee. I am the planning director for Powell County. We're gonna try and talk over the lawnmower and speak the paperwork, so. Multi-talented I am. So I'm also just gonna provide you mostly some pictures and just kind of a quick story about some of the events that we have going on across Southwest Montana right now. So as we all know, the Deer Lodge Valley now has generations that have missed out on opportunities to enjoy clean river and riparian habitat along the North Fork. We've been speaking about that a lot today. So our request to NRD is to advocate for $210,900 in supplemental funding for a larger grant that Powell County has applied for in conjunction with 5 other local jurisdictions. And so really, our push here is similar to what Dory is asking for. We're really looking at natural resource connectivity just along the Clarkport corridor through Powell County. So,
I'm sorry.
So this larger grant that we've applied for is actually would look at building a trail from the Montana-Idaho border down to Butte. But we have some gaps in funding, and there's an alignment with NRD's funding priorities and looking at, again, just kind of larger connectivity. So the portion that we're missing funding for is between Racetrack and Warm Springs. And then we're also looking for some supplemental funding in Granite County. So this would support some of the work that we're already doing. So we talked a little bit about match funding today. So we are bringing that to the table. We're bringing a partnership that kind of works across these jurisdictions. But really, we're just looking to supplement, so this trail funding that we're looking at, it's planning funding. We're looking at where the trail might go, doing a lot of work with stakeholders. But what we're missing is some of the finishing features that are so important to this restoration. So we can look at where the trail is going to go and how it's going to be built, but what we want to see is some additional habitat, opportunity to look at habitat features, opportunity to connect in, like the Warm Springs to Racetrack to this larger trail corridor. In addition, we've talked about the need to really direct user traffic, make sure that we're respecting the resource by providing access points. There's definitely a need, especially between Garrison and Drummond, to have additional fishing and hunting access. And then lastly, I'll skip my economic side.
Oh, no, you
So-
can, if you forgot the road like that.
There we go. So there's also additional benefits to this. Our local economies have greatly suffered in the last few decades. We've seen great disinvestment. The railroad's gone. The smelting operations are gone, and what we're seeing is a replacement by a recreation economy. So Headwaters Economics is a group out of Bozeman. They did do a study that showed some of the economic benefits that trails bring to our communities. This is so important for our rural communities. And so this is some of the stats. Just so by completing just this section of trail, we're expecting $800,000 in additional tax revenue to Montana, $6 million in additional visitor spending, additional trips. Last year we completed a section of trail from Garrison to Deer Lodge. We are already seeing a lot of additional just local traffic. So we ask that you help us kind of, support this development, add to this resource connectivity, and help us kind of transition these blighted landscapes into something that could be beautiful and acceptable.
Any questions from council? Steve Hill.
Sorry. I appreciate seeing the economic benefits that you pointed out, Amanda. Can you draw some comparisons from other communities that have major trail systems or regions that have major trail systems to the health benefits of those?
Oh, absolutely. That's a big piece of it. I mean, look towards, Butte and Missoula. So those are two of our partners, are both Butte and Missoula. Locally, Deer Lodge, actually, we partner with our local business center. They write trail prescriptions, they write walking prescriptions. And so we see doctors that are sending people out to Arrowstone Park to go walking. So, you know, what we're looking at would be connecting, you know, things like Arrowstone Park and some of the boat access there to this larger trail. So absolutely, I mean, I think that's why it's so important to support these recreation opportunities, right? It has the health benefits, it has the economic benefits. And so, and you see in Butte that that's one of the ways that they attract local businesses. And certainly that they keep people active. You know, we see people, you build it and they come.
Thanks.
Other questions from council? Any questions from the public?
Dory Screwford, Butte Silver Bow and the Greenway Service District. Thanks, Amanda, for a great presentation. Butte Silver Bow is a partner with this project. We think it's really amazing to put a number of counties together to string that along and work very hard. Contributed to having a raise grant, the grant submitted to the infrastructure bill to get this funding. The segments of the Greenway Trail that are already built, that's the alignment. This is part of the law, part of a greater vision, the coast to coast rail trail. And so seeing this happening in that connection from the Atlantic to the Pacific would be just so amazing. So there's some good construction dollars in there, but the feasibility is really that part of the funding, figuring out where it's gonna go, who owns it, how you get it, how you get an easement on it. I know what the challenges are. And so I think this is a really great opportunity, plus the camaraderie, the great telephone calls that we've had with these folks putting this together. And so we're really excited to see some movement and connections into Silverbow County.
Yeah, thank you, Dory. I really appreciate the endorsement. You know, we don't just want to see a trail through our community. We want to see people connecting to the, you know, to the river. And that's what this funding would provide.
You.
Ted Dodge is up next. Ted doesn't have a presentation, so Ted will be able to get right in. And then following that, Nate is.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Ted Dodge. I'm Executive Director of the Watershed Restoration Coalition. And we've been partnered with NRDP since the beginning. I think the first meeting Carol Fox had was with us. We are working on aquatic projects and terrestrial projects in the upper Sark Fork. We have about 8 different areas that we're working with right now. Today I wanted to visit with you about 2 areas. One very quickly, and there's a fact sheet. When I get to the Browns Gulch, you have a fact sheet in your project. The first project I'm talking about is Cottonwood Creek. Doug alluded to it earlier. These are the projects that Cottonwood Creek are already in the plan. The first one, that's the first priority, is the forward manning ditch where the Cottonwood enters. The Clark Fork. Caleb and Brian are working with us on that, and we're waiting to see. We believe they'll be moving forward on that. And there's 2 other projects. The Macquarie project and the Dipple Rock Creek Branch project. We've finished a number of projects on Cottonwood Creek, and as we do everywhere, we've added substantial match on the projects in Cottonwood. Today, I wanted to visit with you about Browns Gulch, and you do have a fact sheet that gives the history. Yes, we spent all the money. I will say that having worked across the upper Clark Fork, I'm really proud of the Mile High Conservation District and the folks on Browns Gulch. We have the opportunity to have the first drainage in the upper Clark Fork that has every landowner from the top to the bottom doing the priority projects. So I have 3 landowners here today that are also part of the Mile High Conservation District. And I know they want to speak to this. When we ran out of money we didn't stop. We, in conjunction with the Mile High, went out and met with all the landowners, identified projects. And there's 4 projects in your, that are not in your packet. Those 4 projects are diversions on Cam Valentine's. We have, by next month, those were designed by NRDP money for the funds ran out. By next month, we should have a little over $100,000 to build those 4. So we're not looking for funds. The projects that we're going to move forward on are all fish passage, entrainment, stream restoration, and beaver mimicry and hardened crossings. If we get those done, we will have every landowner and almost every diversion on the creek handled. And the landowners will also be reaching out to the NRCS to see if we can get equip dollars to help match up there. Well, I guess I want to understand you, or Don you, excuse me, and Valentine and Katie Dallas-Serra. And I'd like them to speak to this effort because they've been the folks who got this lined up. And I'm just their goal. So Don.
I'm Don Newman, member of the Mile High Conservation District and the landowner on Browns Gulch Creek. Browns Gulch Creek's a priority stream, as you know. I took pictures instead of getting them up on there. I'm a paper guy. So I wanted to just take a look at these. I can explain it a little bit. This is a hardened rock crossing. And this is the stream erosion below the hardened rock crossing. This is a picture of it, the stream that's been restored above the hardened rock crossing. And this is further downstream from the rock crossing. So those 3, you can have those. I think that's our #1 project on Browns Gulch Creek.
Roger, would you mind passing those around for us?
Sure. I'd say that the stream restoration project was completely funded by DEP, not NRDP.
Right above that. We had some participation with it too.
Right.
Not necessarily NRD, and Future Fisheries and other people were in there. But I think those pictures are self-explanatory of the stream in that area. And what we'd like to do is the next segment, which would be about 400 yards, and make it look like the top section. But otherwise, the stream's going to get worse. And, you know, it's a bigger project than us as just landowners. You know, we're not diverting water there. There's really no benefit. What we're losing there is our topsoil down the stream. So, you know, this could be a benefit for us with topsoil, fisheries, everything. I think it'd be a win-win project all the way. So we're probably asking for a little bit of grant, a little bit of, what do you call it?
Funding.
Yeah, funding, participation on it too.
Right.
This is another project that we had there on our ranch. We think we have 5 or 6 projects in there. This was a diversion project. The diversion is actually right below this culvert. In order to get the project done with the fish bypasses and a new diversion, it would have hurt the stream restoration, would have shortened up the stream and made it a steeper grade. So we went away from that project of a diversion, and our plan now is just to replace the culvert. That's another project. And then, of course, with the hardened stream crossings, we could use numerous ones of those all the way down. Our stream is in a little bit better shape than that the rest of the way, but our stream is probably 5-6 miles long. That is all on a downhill grade, and the entrenchment's getting worse every year. So we'd ask for all the help we can get. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. You have something?
No, I guess the only thing I have to say is that.
Sir, can you state your name?
Oh, it's Pete Dalser from the Mile High Conservation District in WRC. And it's just, the hardest part is getting a lot of landowners involved. And we've kind of worked to get a lot of different landowners involved. And there's an opportunity for you guys to get some of these stream entrapments out of the way so the fish can get from the bottom to the top. if we figure out if the fish are getting up there. That's something that, hey, we're working on right now. That's all I have to add.
Thanks, Pete. Pam, did you?
Ken Valentine. Member of the WRC and Mile High Conservation District. And I live at the upper end of the gulch, and we do have fish up there. And they're native cutthroats. And I came to the board 25 years ago about to give funding to do a study of cutthroats. So 25 years later, we got that. Projects that the funding provided back 25 years ago. The purpose on the upper end, the purpose of my projects is to protect and improve the native cutthroat fishery stuff in the area. And it includes at the end for everybody to try and spell all seven.
And thanks, Cam. And, so we're gonna continue to look for additional, cost shares like we do everywhere. And, we are excited that, and I'm really proud of these guys because they went out and worked with their neighbors, and it wasn't my staff, it was them. And we helped them. So that's all we have. And I thank you for the time.
Any questions from council?
So I have a conflict of interest first. That's my uncle Donnie Hewlin, so I have to clarify that.
Mike Pathauser.
Yeah. But I do want, we had the pleasure, me and Nick had a pleasure of meeting with these guys at Mile High Conservation District. And their point is that we ran out of money because we're good at spending it. And not in a way that was irresponsible, but we got projects done. And they did what is resonated through this meeting of being able to get landowner cooperation in the corridor. So I just want to applaud you as somebody that effectively got the money on the ground and would ask the council to be considerate of the fact that a unit of restoration is a unit of restoration, whether it occurs at Rock Creek or Browns Gulch.
Anything more from council? We'll open it up to the public.
Oh, good, I lost them. So I'll finish this up and just say thank you for this opportunity. It's our belief as an organization that when we're all done and all said and gone, that it's going to be the working ag lands in the Upper Clark Fork and the landowners who keep this going. And supporting them, we think, is very important. So thank you for the opportunity.
Folks, before we go, while they're setting up this presentation, I wanted to introduce, we have a new council member, Dave Wyrick for the park.
Yeah.
And you are here, I forget the name of the gentleman you are here in place of.
Oh, it's Alan Stewart, and actually Jackie LaBelle.
So we did not introduce him at the beginning. I want to introduce him to you all. Welcome.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, council members, chairperson, CEO, and fellow members of the public. I'm Raylan Brando with the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program based out of Montana Tech, and here representing myself and my staff team who's all back there and our partners. And so we're coming to you with a request for another $2.2 million to be added to the education funds. I like to be very conservative with my budgeting and promise only what I can deliver on. And so this request is a 4-year request, assuming that we do not meet any of our measurable targets to match our, or to increase our funding from private sources and decrease the amount that we are spending from the NRD budget. Okay. Okay, so with the request, we're proposing to spend this down over 10 years. And like I said, we want to not overpromise. We want to under-promise, over-deliver. And so given that budget, that what is in your packet is reflective of what it would cost for us to operate as is today. We're open to changing our deliverables as well, because we've read through your strategic plan and the things that you need in the Upper Clark Fork. We're willing to change some of those and increase some of the deliverables that we have for the program as well. So how does CEQA meet the criteria for funds? And I know that Doug covered this briefly, but I gave you 3 different process plans to look at in your packets and things that you've had before. And basically in 2014, we were added as an amendment to move things over to the education fund. And starting in that fiscal year of 2014, there was to be 10 years of funds, but no longer than 20 years. And so that's where we're coming back to you to look for that next 10 years of funding, given that we have a lot of time to work on restoration projects as well. Go ahead. And really the point of CEQA was always about legacy. It wasn't necessarily about, do we move shovels of dirt? It's rather about, do we motivate minds and hearts and people to take care of this restoration into the long term, into the 7 generations past ourselves. And so I pulled this quote from 2007 in one of our evaluation meetings that the then Chief of Counsel for Governor Schweitzer said that in terms of legacy, this is probably the most important program that we will fund. And we continue with that legacy to this day, ensuring that people are understanding what's going on in the Clark Fork, they're understanding what has happened here, and they are willing to take care of it for the future, and thereby in protecting your investments in this project. I also would like to talk about restore. We're all here to talk about restoration of the Clark Fork, and then we're to restore these communities and the riparian area. But the restoration process is also about the people and the communities that have been left behind. The communities that you serve are environmental justice communities because of Superfund and the legacy of Superfund that's been left behind here. In our basin, approximately 60% of kids qualify for free and reduced hot lunch. So that means that they are of low socioeconomic status. They do not have the means to attend college, nor do they have the means to actually connect with scientists in a meaningful way and see a path forward out of that poverty. Many of our students in this basin are also first-generation college students, and over half of the students in this basin who will apply to college will be those first-generation college students. So approximately 30% of our students in this basin apply to college and go, although we have a high graduation rate of about 85% of students graduate from high school. If those students choose to go into a STEM career, that 30% even shrinks further down to about 5%. So when you're talking about an informed and scientifically literate citizenry, having access to people doing this work is critically important. Having models that look like me and look like my colleagues is really important so that they can see that they could too be a scientist, and they could also be adding value to what is happening here in this restoration project, and be the people that are like you sitting in the audience and on this council who are informed and ready to pick up the mantle. Just as a point of fact, in terms of economic stability, the Montana Tech graduates, a student who graduates from Montana Tech's annual salary is an average of $104,000. So if you bring that $104,000 salary to your community, you have just increased the economic viability of your community and the taxable income base as well. Go ahead. In your strategic plan, you have monitoring of the restoration projects that are going on. We have an incredible partnership with the University of Montana Bird Ecology Lab, and through that project, we've been doing bird monitoring for over 15 years in the basin. We've also been doing osprey monitoring and looking at the food chain effects. We can continue to add that to your strategic plan and to your goals and looking at how the restoration is going. Additionally, go ahead. We are your public education and outreach group. So we meet people where they are and not in these meetings of the same 10 people. Like I like to call it the STP, because when we get these meetings together, it's the same 10 people in the room. We're all informed. We all talk about the same things, but the people who are outside moving the shovels of dirt, working their lands, are out there. And that's where CEQA is. In Deer Lodge this last week, I had students in my classroom who for the first time were hearing about what's going on in their watershed. They went home and talked to their parents who said, I didn't know we had a problem here. I didn't know our river was polluted. I didn't know that Arrowstone Park still had tailings impounded there. So we've been working at it for a long time, but there's a lot more work to be done, and it has to be always done. Hence why we're coming back to ask for more funding. This also aligns to your strategic plan in that we can provide for you a deeper level of community support if you should choose that. We are open to amending those deliverables as needed. Go ahead. We have a business plan and development strategy. I have given you a packet of that. It has some seeds attached to it. I didn't want to belabor that in either our proposal or here today, but basically we're looking at creating a 25% structure. So 25% of our funding would come from NRD, or approximately $250,000 a year, and then 25% from the other three areas. Contracts and fee for service, which we already have some of that in bank, our continuation with our federal and state grants, and then our 25%, which is a development plan or philanthropy plan. The details of that are in that packet, and I can certainly be reached for questions on each of those. Go ahead. So how far along are we? This is as of yesterday, correct, Tammy? So as of yesterday, you can see our 25% category of NRD is overfull. We would like to start shifting that down and downgrading how much we're spending out of those accounts as we upgrade the others. At our 25% state and federal grants, we're currently at 100% for this year. We're about 76% for next year. In the small contracts, subawards, and fee for service, we're at 47%, 43% respectively. And then in our development, which is corporate, individual, private foundation donations, we're at 23% and 20%. And that marks a big change from last year where we were at approximately 9%. So we are moving the needle along. We're working very hard to get these plans in place. We need more time to be able to make the other three categories exceed the first category. So our future directions, we absolutely want to continue the story of rebirth, and the ecosystem still has impacts. So we want to continue to talk about it, message about it, explain why monitoring is important, explain why it takes time to get things done. One of my favorite conversations I just had was with one of the operators who's working down at Warm Springs for you right now, moving dirt. And he said, how come I have to have 10 opinions from 10 different engineers to know how to move the dirt? And I'm like, because it's a process and it's not as easy as just being dirt. It's tailings, it's contamination that we don't want in the river. We are those voices for you. We'd like to position ourselves as conservation education leaders and leaders in science professional development. Part of our federal funding match is looking for that. And then we believe that place-based education equals engagement. And I have letters from our students who have become professional scientists. And I'll read this one just briefly, part of it from Sean Moorman, who just graduated from Montana Tech this last week. He said, I had the opportunity to intern for the Clarksburg Watershed Education Program for nearly 3 years while attending Montana Tech. I was first introduced to CFWEP in a biology class that I was taking as a science elective. For our class, we went on a trip to Silverbow Creek near Fairmont. Growing up in Deer Lodge, I had heard of the pollution and the cleanup, but that was about it. It was through that field trip that I learned of the severity of the contamination and about all the work that went into cleaning it up and the restoration that followed. On that trip, we looked at water quality, macroinvertebrates, and riparian habitat. I could not believe that this stream had been lifeless less than 25 years earlier. The moment sparked my interest in restoration and biology, so much so that I switched my major to biology and also decided to pursue the restoration certificate. I knew that I wanted to work with animals and I wanted to spread the message of restoration and conservation. That is what CFWEP does. We ensure this legacy going forward, utilizing the unfortunate and beautiful circumstance of having a Superfund in our backyard. So I really thank you. I'm open to questions on our budget, on our plans. I can certainly be reached after this meeting. I know it's been long and I appreciate your time sitting through the meeting with us today.
Well, love this. The way you've broken this down, you have a strategy. So, commend that.
Thank you, Steve.
Mike Pathos, no, Steve, by the way,
Yeah.
he's forgetting the top. I also want to applaud you guys because last time you were in council here, this is exactly what we asked for, was a written strategy for how you guys would be working your way towards a CFLEP that operates in perpetuity as opposed to one that's tied to this fund. And we appreciate the effort and the work and the team in the back. Some of you guys, I think, new faces, right? You've hired so many people to help accomplish that mission. So just want to applaud you.
Thank you.
Right, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
Look, in 2012,
This is Ben.
I'm sorry, Nick, for instance, 2012, we did the long range plan for Governor Schweitzer's instructions. At that time, you'd already received some money from fund overtime in 2007. Mr. Nelson's comment about CFLEP for state and the governor's office, that's 2006. 2012, Governor Schweitzer said to the board, I don't want to keep continuing CFLEP forever. You will give them $4 million in a trust fund. And then they will operate off that trust fund and raise money. Is the trust fund still in existence or has that been spent?
The trust fund will be expended in 2024. Well, it'll probably be as in our current spending, we can extend probably to December of 2024. And then that would be expended, the education trust account.
That's the principle.
Correct. No, it's all of it. The interest earnings in that account were less than the actuary at Montana Tech and Kathy Coleman expected. And then the second piece that hit us really hard was right about that time is when the Obamacare changes for healthcare came in. So our healthcare insurance costs went up double. So our first request to the council with me as the executive director, I went from a budget of around $300,000 a year to a $450,000 per year budget. So those two changes, shortened our life cycle. We're about 500,000 or $1 million every 2 years.
Thank you.
Clarify to Mike again, this is a 2-year budget proposal or a 1-year?
It's a 4-year budget proposal as in your packet that's in the response to comment.
Okay.
And then what you have before you is our current strategy of funding those accounts at 25%. And with that 4-year budget, again, like I said, it's assuming we don't meet any of those goals or objectives and that took those 25% accounts. That is what we would need to operate solely from NRDP.
Any other questions, comments from council? Any questions, comments from the public?
Doris Rupert, Silverboat Creek Greenway, and I have a disclaimer to make. I financially contribute to CFLEP on an annual basis and participate in their great fundraising activities. The Greenway, Silverboat Creek Greenway supports their, now our bird observation and test monitoring. We've got raised boxes, nesting boxes in riparian areas along Silverboat Creek. The Silverboat Creek Greenway is a CFLEP laboratory. And access to that laboratory is so incredible and important. And so I just can't say enough. I think we have such a great partnership and outreach and putting kids on the creek and, kids fishing and things like that. A bus can pull into our trailhead and those kids can offload and get out and we can provide them a rudimentary bathroom. So they aren't, Braylon is not sending them out into the high grasses. So, but this is truly another partnership, just another layer of how incredible the impacts to the restoration impacts that the natural resource damage program brought to Superfund. And so seeing those changes over time is what Braylon is teaching our kids. So thank you.
Paul Humphreys from Montana Tech. I just want to talk about the impact that I have seen CFLEP take at both the elementary school and the undergrad level at Montana Tech. There's been a lot of talk today about the long-term outlook of what we do and how we fund this. And I really think that if there's any project that I truly believe secures the future of the protection of the Clark-Fort River, it's CFLEP. I'm all for ecological monitoring. That's what I work in. But when we think about what the Clark-Fort River looks like into the future, this is what we want.
Yes, sir.
And this is, my name's Brad Archibald, I'm from Butte, I just want to testify to CFLIP's efforts to employ their strategic plan. I have been enlisted by CFLIP along with many of my friends and family to network in the community to try to help them reach that philanthropic goal. They are working hard to enlist local members of the community to help reach that goal. Another plan. I'd like to know.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Ted Dodge, WRC. I just want to say that a few years back, we were able to get a Wildlife Conservation Society grant, an area one grant to do beaver mimicry, a large beaver mimicry project with Basic Creek Reservoir. We went to see what they had students out there, and the students were involved in the whole process. It's great, and it really added to what we've done. And so I will thank Brandon publicly and tell you that I think it's well within.
Thank you. One more question, yeah.
Well, I'm Melissa Wanamaker, and I'm one of the newest members of the CFLIP staff. And just wanted to let you know, in 2019, when I first came on to help with the feasibility study, private investment was 1%. And how far Raven and the team and our community executive leadership team have come to 6% to 9%. So where they are now, if we can keep that trajectory, there's hope.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Pavlovich. I am CFLIP's social scientist now, and so I'm happy to be here. I think about that old proverb that when humans plant trees, that they'll never sit in the shade of, and what that means. And this whole council here and everybody in the room has done that. And I'm honored to be in the room, and I just want to think also about that it's important for the people who do end up sitting in the shade of the trees that you planted, that they know why. That they know why those trees are there, how they got there, and what that means as part of that legacy. And CFLIP consistently over delivers. As part of my job there, the way that they report their direct contact, they're super careful. People need to report or say what they did directly. When they're working with teachers, they say we've worked with 800 teachers. That means thousands of students that are trained in a way of what you have done in your legacy, to think about watersheds and how that all connects economically, recreationally, ecologically, and what that means. And that has gone all the way up to the state level and was even part of the conversation for the creation of the science standards this last time, K through 12, which is every student in the state. And that's not something that's on the website because it's indirect, but it's still there. So it ripples up.
Yes.
My name is Joel Gerhardt from Helena, Montana, and I just want to tell you a little bit of my own story. When I was in high school, I was a farm kid from Belgium. And I was fairly good at math, and my counselor, nobody in my family had ever gone to college. Most of them had not graduated from high school. Counselor said, you're pretty good at math. Why don't you go to engineering day? So I went to engineering day, said, hey, maybe this is something I could do. So I ended up going to Montana Tech and getting an engineering degree and working on a lot of stuff around sports, so you might recognize it. But the other thing I would like to say is through the time, I've worked with students on from CFLIP during Remedy, seeing them out on site and seeing the lights come on, get excited about what those careers can be for them. Same thing in East Helena on the Prairie Creek site, when we bring students out there, they gauge the stream, they look at the bugs, they look at the bunnies, they see what we've done out there, they get excited, and we can take them forward. So I just want to point out that this has a real impact on certain students in. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for the seat packs. Yeah.
We have made it to our last speaker, I think. Paul's up. He's going to talk about the microbial study that I did not do a very good job of explaining during the. Sure. Pretty good.
Okay. That's the space for it. Yeah, I will. All right, here we go. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. We're gonna get started, please. Thank you for the introduction. As was said earlier, I'm Paul Helfrich. I'm here representing the laboratory that I work for, which is the Laboratory Exploring Geobiochemical Engineering and Natural Dynamics, also known as the Legend Lab at Canada. And I am very excited to tell you about the work that Legend has been carrying out for the past few years and really introduce what I think is an important and understudied aspect of the Clark Fork ecosystem. Today, I'll be talking about integrated geochemical and microbial modeling for the improvement of salmoniid habitat. I think the best place to start, and I know that you all are familiar with this, but I would be remiss not to bring up the immense cultural and economic importance of the Upper Clark Fork historically, especially to the indigenous peoples of this area. Unfortunately, as we know, the immense mining near Butte, Montana has come with a cost. And in no small part to the people like those in this room, we are beginning to understand how to better restore this area and move it forward into being more ecologically productive and complex. As it has been touched on, however, there are many things that we don't necessarily understand about this ecosystem at this current time. This is exemplified by the recent problems that we have seen in the Upper Clark Fork when it comes to the brown trout numbers in the upper reaches of this area. It is my belief and the belief of many of the people that I work with that some of the answers to these questions are held in the most fundamental aspects of the ecosystem. The edge between where the living and non-living parts of this stream interact. What I'm specifically talking about, of course, are the microbes which form the basis of this food chain and represent the biogeochemical engineers that really run the river. I think that the best place to start as far as introducing our project is to talk about the type and scale of data that Legend collects. We sample 17 sites all along the Upper Clark Fork and into Silverbow Creek. We go down as far as to Drummond, Montana, below the outflow of Flint Creek, to Garrison, below the outflow of the Little Blackfoot River. We sample the area where German Gulch enters the river all the way up through our control site on Blacktail Creek. So what I hope that I'm really communicating here is that we sample an immensely large geographic area. Recently, we have become interested in the ecological effects of the addition of treated vertically pit water into Silverbow Creek, but we study it all. As far as what we study and how we do it, we gather an immense amount of both biological and geochemical data. We gather data on everything from dissolved metals to dissolved inorganic carbon, dissolved organic carbon, anions, cations, pH, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, and then all to complement this, and most importantly, we gather an immense amount of biological data that is stored in the sediment and the water as shed DNA and proteins. I believe that this data that we have been collecting holds an immense potential for integrating with ongoing ecological monitoring in this watershed and really can help us answer some of those questions that I talked about earlier. I think the most direct application of our data is geochemical modeling. As we all know, metals are a big concern in this watershed, but concentration is not the whole story. When in the aquatic environment, metals take a variety of forms or species that have varying bioavailabilities to them. So we can understand not only how much of an analyte of interest that is present in the water, but also the form that it takes and make predictions about just how ecologically relevant that actually is. Additionally, the data that we collect as far on the biological side, sometimes known as environmental DNA, holds immense potential for informing ecological monitoring because of how non-specific it is. When we go out and we filter water, we are gathering data on everything from macroinvertebrates to microbes to eukaryotic microorganisms all the way up to fish. Whenever we take a water sample or a sediment sample, we are collecting biological information from everything that is living in the stream, not just one thing. Additionally, because each sample is a complete biological and geochemical snapshot of the river at that time, and we have been doing this at 17 sites 4 times a year for about 7 years, we have nearly 500 samples stored in our archives that represent that consistent geochemical and biological data. This is an immense wealth of information that is ready for exploration when it comes to informing the restoration of the aquatic fork. As far as some ideas that come to the top of my head, the main thing that I think is most straightforward is examination of stressful hotspots using those geochemical models. Like I talked about, concentration isn't everything. Using the both concentration data that we collect as well as the speciation data, I think that we can identify areas on the Clark Fork that are most stressful biologically. And then going into my background, I did both my undergrad and my master's study detecting salmonid disease, specifically a parasite known as Tetracapsuloides bryl salmone, otherwise known as PKD. This is an example of me detecting the parasite in the water at a certain site that it was absent of just a few miles down. This allowed me to gain information on the distribution of the parasite without ever cutting open a fish. I believe that this is a powerful tool that is currently underexplored in the Clark Fork River. Like I said, this doesn't have to just be salmonid parasites. This can be the fish themselves, this can be the microbes, we've got it all. But the main strength of our data, and what I believe is the main strength of the application that we have put in, is that we have an immense sample size. Every single one of our observations is a complete biological and geochemical record of the river at that time. We sample at the same time every year. We sample at literally the exact same spots every time we go out. So if you all are interested in metal data from the water, from the sediment over the past 7 years across the really much of Silverbow Creek and the Upper Clark Fork, we have that available, and we have all of the biological data that you could want to go with it. Any questions?
I have one for you that's not directly related, excuse me, Mick Ringside. There's an ARCO study that dates about 10 years ago on cleaning up the rivers. Went from Silverbow Creek to the black that came into it. But in there, it says that filtering the water at a certain point actually increases the problem of the gills to process oxygen. And I'm a poli-sci major, that's way up here. It makes no sense to me at all. And can I get your data and I'll send you that?
Sure. I would be very interested.
Answer for that. Why would filtered water be harder for the fish to dissolve than polluted water that we just put in the stream?
So I assume what that is potentially referring to has to do with like osmotic pressure. That would be my guess. But I am not aware of anywhere that that idea has been implemented on a large scale. So I'm not really sure how to approach that, but I'd certainly be interested to know. I'd certainly be interested to see that study.
Thank you.
When I talk about filtered water, I'm really talking about taking a water sample out of the river, pouring it over my filter, and then I can extract the DNA from that filter. So we're not really interested in filtering the river itself. Any other questions? Yes.
Amy Steinmetz, DEQ, is your data publicly available or
Yeah.
I'm really interested.
Absolutely. So I hope that what this data or what this presentation says, and what maybe I should have been a little more clear about, is that we have this information archived. So we have sediment samples, we have filters, but the reason that I'm applying for money today is so that we can process that. Every time that I want to do an ICP-MS sample of the river water, that's like $30 at the Bureau of Mines and Geology. And I think that really what I want to stress is that our lab archive exists, and we just need the money to push that from being frozen bottles into data. We have an immense data set available that we can certainly use to show you all like the proof of concept. But in terms of exploiting the data from those 500 samples that we have, that is what we need the money for.
Thank you.
Yes,
Use the mining money to mine the data.
absolutely.
Got it.
That's the idea.
Yes. You talked about bioavailability.
Steve Hill.
Steve Hill. You talked about bioavailability.
Absolutely.
And that's certainly specific to the compound you're
That we're
encountering and the species.
Certainly.
Have you come up with any results on bioavailability or bioaccumulation or biomagnification on any particular species?
Sure, absolutely. So I will say that right now, the status of using bioavailability to inform ecological monitoring is at we're kind of beginning to understand it. Because right now, bioavailability tests for people that may not be familiar with this, are largely focused on the toxicity of specific compounds to charismatic species like salmonid fish, like Daphnia. I think that these things are very interesting and very useful in the larger scope. But as far as models that exist that say, okay, this specific species is toxic to microorganisms, that data is not necessarily even beginning, or it hasn't even really begun to be put together. That being said, my dissertation is going to focus on that exact idea. And I can say that using some of the metagenomes that I talked about today, those biological records of microorganisms, I can say that when I put that into a regression model, we see copper hydroxide, which is the species that is primarily present at pHs above 8. It's likely what is present in the creek, at least to some degree, being correlated with changes to the microbial community, let's say. So I think that one of the possible opportunities that we could see out of this data is that we just need a larger sample size. I hope that answers your question.
Well, you need a larger sample size, but you need to also be able to analyze.
Sure, absolutely.
That you have.
Definitely. And we have lots of samples. The ones that we have already, I have 16 metagenomes sitting on my computer right now. I can tell you that there's definitely correlations between copper speciation and the microbial community. I need more data so that I can actually figure out what that looks like as a whole.
Can you extend that up to food chain?
Certainly. That will likely not be my focus because my focus is largely on microorganisms. But like I talked about, every piece of biological data that we collect has information on everything from stoneflies to fish themselves. I think that we can use this data and exploit this idea to draw correlations between the things that are up the food chain. I just think that we should start at the bottom of the food chain first. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mike Pappas, you, So the outcome, I mean, the data sounds very interesting, fascinating to me as someone that came from a science background and an engineering background. What are you seeing as like the benefit outcome to the Clark Fork River system outside of understanding it,
Absolutely.
right? Like, I'm looking at discharge water from the Berkeley pit. Could you put microorganisms back into that water to make the
That's the kind of,
system more healthy?
yeah, I think that's a really interesting potential of this data. I think that where I would start with that is that mining isn't going anywhere, right? Like, not for a very long time. So if we can use what we find in the Clark Fork to inform the restoration of other rivers, that's phenomenal. That's the big picture idea. I think that we can use this data to better understand how mining changes rivers, period. But what I think that we can really do as far as the benefits to the Clark Fork is I think that with a greater understanding of what is going on at the bottom of the food chain, then we absolutely open ourselves up to things like, okay, we need to make sure that the community of this microorganism is present further upstream so that it can do this biogeochemical process. The other really interesting thing that I think is a possibility out of this data is that I touched briefly on protein data. Proteins are the way that organisms interact with the surrounding environment. And a lot of what I've studied in the metagenome so far have to do with the proteins that are interacting with things like copper pollution. So I'm not an engineer. I'm not somebody who thinks, okay, how do we apply this to another study? You know, I'm all about going out there and scraping the slime off rocks. But I do think that isolation of proteins like this or understanding the genomic data as a whole could potentially allow us to exploit some of the ways that microorganisms survive in Silverbow Creek so that we can introduce life into really, really stressful places.
Yeah. Or detect, like we
Or
were talking
detect
last
those
time about this brown trout issue. We
Absolutely.
might be able to detect this months, years in advance
Certainly.
and address it before the trout population. So it's like moving up the lead indicator chain. Do I understand that?
That's exactly right. Yep.
That's pretty.
And because we have done this for so long, we've talked about how this is not a new issue. We can look back in time using this data. The metagenomes that I'm looking at right now are from 2015 and 2016. They sat in our -80 for several years and they were ready to go. As soon as we had the money to extract the DNA from them, they were ready. And that's just beginning to scratch the surface because all I've looked at so far is the copper resistant. So we could look at zinc, cadmium, we could look at nutrients, we could look at, you know, how these things affect brown trout, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not somebody who's going to focus on the vertebrate populations, but I do think that that is very much the end goal of this study. I just think that there is so much data sitting in our archives right now. We just need the money to make it a reality. Any other questions?
You're saying you're the next Carl Sagan. Thank you.
I'm flattered, but I am not so. Fantastic.
Public?
Oh, good, public.
My presentation. We'll get through a couple things, administrative things here, very quickly. I would like to, recognize Paul. I think he, actually conquered the, remote the best. I don't know if he did. So a couple things that I have, Nathan's gonna bring up, on there. He's gonna bring up our presentation again, we go to the top.
There.
So I'm gonna briefly talk about, the schedule and how much funding, we have to work with in the plan revision. And so to talk about the schedule ahead of time, if they get this going, where we are, we're hoping to get a draft restoration plan out for public comment sometime in June. We will be contacting you to try to arrange for a public meeting or another advisory council meeting so that we can present that to you. It'll be also a public meeting as this is. So that will be late June. I will be reaching out to you shortly with a doodle poll to find a date that works for all the council members on that. Following the public comment on the restoration, the draft restoration plan, that will close sometime in July. Staff will work on developing a response to comments as well as revising the restoration plan to a draft final for your review and consideration early fall in the September timeframe. So that's when this council will make its recommendation to the trustee of what they feel should be in the draft restoration plan or the restoration plan. So we will provide that to you for your consideration. You will make a recommendation on that to the governor. Later on in the fall in October, we'll have a trustee restoration council where your chairman Christie will represent this council, and then they will also make their recommendation to the governor with the hopes that the governor will have a new restoration plan on his desk sometime before the end of the year that he can sign, and then we can start implementing a new plan in 2024. So please keep an eye on your emails for a doodle poll that will be coming out. I will probably be sending that out tomorrow for some dates. So can you go down slightly? No, we gotta go back up. I just did that.
You wanna go up now?
Yeah, I need to go back to the funny. I want to let folks know how much we have to do. Keep going back up, 3 more slides.
Jumped in front of you while you were finding it.
One more slide. 2 more slides, right there, excellent. So how much do we have to allocate? So we have several sources of funding. The first source of funding is the interest. So the Upper Clark Fork River Basin Fund sits in one pot. Those funds are allocated to the aquatic and terrestrial resources and groundwater resources, but they're all in one pot. We have calculated, in working with Miranda, that they're between 2019 and 2023 now. We have approximately $4 million of interest that can be allocated. It's unallocated at this point, that it can be allocated either to the priority resources that are out there now or to new projects. In addition to that, in the development of the parent tailings removal project, streamside tailings operable unit, these are remediation funds that DEQ used to clean up the streamside for the Silverbow Creek corridor. Any funds that are left over from that corridor per the consent decree are to come to the restoration fund. There are provisions that were put into the process plan that guides us on the restoration plan, that those funds are to be spent from Cottonwood Creek upstream to the headwaters. And Cottonwood Creek is a stream that Andy talked about earlier. It's right here in Deer Lodge. So there's specific provisions on those funds. We do know that there's somewhere between 1.5 and $4 million that will be coming back. Or that will be available to be allocated from those funds. So we'll have a total of between 5.5 and then I'm estimating 6.5. I know that all the math doesn't add up here, but being conservative, we'd rather be conservative on the allocation than not. The one, you can go to the next slide, please, Nathan.
Doug, when would we know that with the amount of the parent tailings?
So we'll talk about that in a second. So this is the interest, and we can get into this further in the fall when Miranda goes over how we calculate our interest and how we're gonna allocate it. But the one thing I wanted to be upfront with you guys about is if you look at this, if you add up all the interest on your aquatics column right here, you're gonna come up with more than $4 million. That is because there is more than $4 million of interest, but we have to account for other funds or other fees from those $4 million. Next slide, please. Or excuse me, from the interest.
I think it's working. Trying to click it.
So the way we calculate that is we actually look at how much we have spent. And I'm gonna look at just the aquatics column here for you guys to make it simple. How much we have allocated to the aquatics. So for $45 million to start, we added another $5 million in 2018. But then we also have to look at our total expenses. And those total expenses on the aquatic watersheds was about $18 million. So we have about $32.4 million in those watersheds. That does not account for all of our expenses. That accounts just for the watershed, just for the amount of money that we spent on watersheds, doing construction, paying for our contractors, our engineers, for our partners to develop contracts, and that type of thing. The cash invested cash dollars, so this was at the previous, the $36 million was on the previous slide. Those are how much has been in our account. I can see I'm getting a lot of blank looks here. But if you compare those two numbers, you get $4.3 million, which is left over in aquatic interest. The big thing that is not in this number on the watersheds that's in this number are the expenses of the program. So all of the time that Brian or Nathan or Sydney or Ray spend out in the field on a project, we charge that to the aquatic fund. It does not show up in this expense up here. It is in an expense down here. So that's how we have to balance that. Graham is gonna do a much better job at it in the fall. We're actually gonna go over this with you guys. But I just want to let you know, we do this balance to make sure that all of our fees are paid and all of our costs are paid before we allocate funds. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to run out of money and not have enough. So in interest, we have about $4 million to allocate. On the parent side, we know right now that there is a balance of $6.3 million left in the parent account. There's about $1 million left of work to do. Plus, there's some long-range costs out there that are uncertain at this point in time. As Jim Ford talked to you when he was here last fall, they have a groundwater capture system that's capturing groundwater that's coming out from below the parent. We'd like very much to, transfer that operation to Atlantic Richfield if they would be so inclined. But that's a work in progress. There's a whole bunch of monitoring that's going on to test the groundwater and also to be a check on some of the responsibilities that we have there. We're also working with EPA and Atlantic Richfield on those activities to see if we can't, share some of those expenses. So there's some long-term expenses that we don't know. That's why we're not sure after, once we get done with the capital expenses at the parent and have 5.3 left, how much we have to allocate. We do know that whatever's left over, 51% of that comes back to the upper Clark Fork. So that's where I've come up with this, 51%, we're gonna have somewhere between 1.5 and $4 million to allocate out of the parent fund. One of the thoughts of how we are planning to try to allocate this funding is on a percentage basis. So for instance, and I'm just gonna randomly throw out watersheds, don't hold me to this. But, just say, the Browns Gulch folks were here, 20% of any remaining funds would go to Browns Gulch. Another 10% would go to Warm Springs Creek, another 30% would go to Cottonwood Creek. So if we do it on a percentage basis, we'll know that, we won't overestimate or overallocate those funds. So that's the way we're looking at it. We've done that in the past and that's been successful. So that's where we are on the funding. That's how we've come to. So this is what you will see in our draft restoration plan that comes out for public comment. This allocation of these funds to the resources that you heard about today.
Council, questions?
Yes, so thank you. So some of these proposals are multi-year. So do you have a projection out through the 4-year cycle?
We don't, Seth, we have always allocated it to those priority resources. So for instance, if we were to allocate additional funding to Cottonwood Creek to work on the projects there, that funding would be allocated to Cottonwood Creek, and, you know, we work on that allocation there. We have not done it in a time matter, no.
Council, other questions?
I see Mike's over there. I didn't do a very good job.
No, I'm good. Yeah. We've been here 3 hours, so I'm sorry. Fade here.
Eliminated your later break, sorry. Public questions?
When will we be working on that allocation, I guess? Or is that coming from you guys? Is that something that we should expect to be planning to help recommend?
So the way this works is in that schedule, the staff will propose the allocation. We'll present that to you at the June meeting. That will also be out for public comment, so we will be able to take your comment at that time. And then we will, in September, when we come out with the draft final restoration plan for your consideration, you know, we'll have incorporated your comments and the public's comments at that point into that draft final for your recommendation to the government.
Other than the percentage split per watershed, what other ways, in what other manners have you figured out how to allocate in the past?
So originally,
Sorry, Christie Beal.
as he's talking So originally what we did is we allocated the funding to the aquatic, terrestrial, and groundwater resources based on the percentages, based on the original lawsuit. Here, what we would do is, I would base it, because we're still going to those priorities, either a terrestrial, aquatic, or in, you know, a recreation project, which we divide up terrestrial and aquatic, based on the priority. That's the way I would look at it from the natural resource damage program, the staff's perspective of it. You know, there are other ways that we can, and we will get you a draft well before the meeting, so you guys will have time to digest that and look at it and come with ideas and thoughts. But I think you could cut that pie up, you know, many different ways. The Butte Area 1 restoration plan has done a similar thing where they just took their percentages, the total funding, and put it in by percentages to different categories. You could do that here too. You know, I just see it as a tool to get to the parent funds that we don't know exactly how much. One of the things, Chrissy, if you remember the trustee restoration council, there was a request by John Seffer with Butte that we allocate those parent funds in this revision. And Chris Hagan, the governor's chief of staff, seconded that. So in order to allocate that whole amount that we don't know, this percentage basis is probably the best way to do that. Okay. Any other questions?
You're talking equal percentages or equitable, whatever the appropriate word is for the.
That was Mike 10,000, by the way.
They've got it by now.
Yeah, they do. It could be equal, Mike. It could be, you know, it could be 80% to one project.
Okay.
And 20 to another, depending on how we break it out. There are other funds, we know how much we're gonna allocate in interest. You know, so some of the highest priority projects, we can make sure, you know, if I'll pick on Cottonwood Creek again. If we know Cottonwood Creek needs another $500,000, we can use the interest to make sure that that is available. You know, so there's flexibility there, and I think that's where, we should be able to, and we should get creative with this allocation to make sure that the funds get, allocated to the appropriate projects, in the best manner.
Christie Beal, parrot tailings money has to at some time become a fairly solid number.
It does. The problem, I think the problem we will have is we wouldn't know that probably until late fall.
Okay.
And so, you know, making that allocation in late fall is gonna be, we won't get the plan done, you know, so that's what we are. So we're 15 minutes late. I would like to recognize everybody. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in. And thank you. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi, so.
This way. And then there's another truck. That's why.